Excellent. So thank you everybody for attending today. This is the public consultation of the traffic calming policy and the guidelines. This is a topic that's worth discussing with the public in town, definitely, and we're excited to have you here. We'll just go through a few housekeeping things and how things are going to roll this evening. Start off with some introductions. I'm Mitch Sobel, Manager of Engineering here in the Engineering Department. We also have with us our Executive Director, Andy Campbell, Senior Project Manager, Bailey Yasher, and Executive Assistant, Madeline Twitchen on the call. And further to staff that's here, we also have, it appears, Councillor Proth online, Councillor Gordon, David Deneau, our CAO, Councillor Downer, and Mayor Strathern, I believe. So welcome to council and other staff that are here this evening. Throughout this, basically this webinar, we're going to go through the presentation, through the policy, the draft policy. We urge you to ask questions throughout. How we're going to do questions is through the Zoom chat feature. So either at the bottom or top of your screen, you should see a chat feature. You can type your questions in at any time. We are likely going to answer the questions in a dedicated question and answering time at the end of the presentation. But depending on the nature of a question that pops up, we may just answer it on the spot. If there is a follow-up question or a question that we need some elaboration on, we may open up the mic to that person that asked the question just for clarification, just to keep things moving along. If you find that after this, you have a question or you have any comments on it, we also encourage people to send questions into the engineering@midland.ca email address. We also have the Engaging Midland site as well that we can send stuff to. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it. So we're all here because of the draft traffic calming policy that we took to council back in May of this year. And so what is the purpose of a traffic calming policy? Well, there's four main components to it. We want to educate the residents about, what is traffic calming, what it is and what it isn't. And the main thing is we want to provide a standard format for dealing with these complaints. We want this consistent approach to making factual based decisions. We don't want to be making decisions on a whim and how we feel and making assumptions. We hope the policy will help address some neighborhood traffic issues within town, help improve safety. And one of the big ones is, educate residents and motorists and help create a safer roadway condition overall. So that's fine and dandy to say, but really, what is traffic calming? Well, traffic calming is a combination of things. There's two main types of traffic calming features that we'll get into here, but ultimately it's a combination of measures that we try to reduce the negative effects of motorists. We want to alter the behavior. We want to improve the safety conditions for non-motorized users, pedestrians, cyclists, things like that. So in order to do that, we have the two main measures that I talked about. We have passive traffic calming and physical traffic calming. So passive traffic calming is features that, visual features, things like our speed radar sign, community safety signs, things like that. Simple modifications that can help draw awareness to speed or to the neighborhood you're driving through, or something that gives the feeling of narrowing the traveled laneway to reduce speeds. Physical traffic calming elements are elements that they're physical in nature. They have vertical and horizontal deflections, physical obstructions. So things like your speed bumps, chicanes, barricades, things like that. So, and traffic calming could be one or the other. It could be a combination. Every situation is different. So, and this is where the policy will help determine which one's more suitable. With anything in life, there is advantages and disadvantages. Some advantages of traffic calming, well, we reduce speeds. The goal is to reduce speeds. We can also reduce volume and in turn improve the neighborhood safety. Some disadvantages could be we could have an increased emergency response time. We could just shift the problem to somewhere else in town. And depending on the nature of the measure that's installed, it could be quite costly to install or maintain over the long run. So all of these things are considered when we propose the proper solution, or the proposed solution, I should say. So we do have some traffic calming measures in town. So we'll go through a few examples of what we have. Our speed trailer and pole mounted radar sign, as you see here, are ones that we've been moving around town this year, and the trailer previous years. So this is a physical device, but it'd be more of a definition of that passive traffic calming feature. Essentially, it draws motorist attentions to what your speed is. You know, we have noticed through this summer, all the data that we've analyzed, that these things do work. 59% of our motorists are shown to reduce their speed once they come into the radar of the sign. So they do work. They are slowing down. We can have them flash fast if you are going over certain speeds. The radar trailer, we have the ability to say a message back, all sorts of different things, and collect the data. Other examples might be a speed hump. So speed humps would be a physical traffic calming measure. It's a vertical deflection, causes discomfort when you hit it fast. You know, these can be quite effective in speed, but where they lack sometimes is you find motorists can speed between the speed humps, and they just slow down for the feature and then they carry on. This exact example is shown down in Little Lake Park, where the speed limit is already reduced to a 20-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. So this is more of a suitable implementation for something like a speed hump. A road that's maybe at a faster speed, it might not be as suitable for. I'm not saying it's not suitable, but there are some disadvantages. Similar to a speed hump, we have raised intersections. Raised intersections are just a bigger speed hump essentially, but it's the entire intersection. So this example shown here is down on Aberdeen Boulevard. There are two intersections that are raised intersections, and the principle is the same. It's a vertical deflection. You hit it at speed, it causes a driver discomfort. Quite often, like this one, it's a contrasting color to the regular road surface, so it kind of draws your attention to their pedestrian crossings and things of that nature. One that you'll notice downtown in the new King Street reconstruction is reduction in some curb radiuses on the corner. So reducing the radius of the corner essentially means that vehicles need to go slower to make that turn. If you have a big arcing radius, well, a vehicle can take that at a higher rate of speed than a short one. So we reduce it, and vehicles have to actually slow down to make the turn. Also with this, it gives you the ability to neck the road in at times, like we did on King Street, if you've noticed. And an advantage of that is the pedestrians have a shorter roadway to actually cross. So we've hopefully done two things in these scenarios, as we've slowed the speeds down. We've also decreased the crossing length in traffic for pedestrian safety as well. This would be another physical traffic calming measure. However, this is where we start to get into the more expensive features. You know, something like this is not as simple as installing a sign. There's curb realignments, there's drainage to consider, there's a number of things. So this is where they start to become more costly. However, yet still effective. This is not an example from town, but this is an example that's used in many different areas. This is a raised island median. So it's basically this principle is twofold. So it's a physical measure, but it's also a bit passive as well. Physical in nature, there's a median in the middle of the road with some landscaping features and whatnot. But the passive nature is it gives the perception that the road is actually narrowed. When in reality, it may not be, but that narrowed feeling, drivers subconsciously slow down. They reduce their speeds. Now, this one as well is could be an expensive implementation, and it has its place. You'll notice here in this example, it looks like we have one lane to the right, maybe a parking lane, and on the left, there's a traveled lane plus appears to be a parking lane. So this is a very wide right of way. So this would be something that is functional and it works. However, it may not be suitable for every situation. Other examples of passive traffic calming measures would be informational signs, the community safety zones, traffic calm neighborhoods, school zones, flashing lights, things like that. Those are all examples of our passive sign or passive traffic calming measures. And those are, again, to draw the motorist's eye to you're coming into an area where the environment has changed, and be aware. The policy also considers, what do we do when we add or delete stop signs for better flow of traffic? this is something that we want the policy to look at. Now, one key thing that we've pulled out from here is stop signs per the Ontario Traffic Manual regulatory signs, which we'll get into a bit later. Stop signs are not intended to be used as speed control devices, but should be used to control right-of-way conflicts. And the reason for this is there's better methods out there for pedestrian control than just a stop sign. And we'll talk about that in a bit later. But that's one of the key things we want. Just by adding a stop sign doesn't necessarily mean that we are providing traffic calming. There's lots of studies that show motorists just speed from stop sign to stop sign, or they do the California roll at the stop sign and they never actually stop. Whoops. Another thing that we want the policy to talk about is speed limit reductions. Where do they apply? What do we have to do to get them? One thing this policy does not talk about, it does not talk about a town-wide speed reduction. It would more be a case-by-case speed reduction on a specific road. A town-wide would be something, it would follow a lot of the same restrictions, the same data and things like that, but this policy doesn't speak to that specifically. Outside of our policy, here are some other guiding documents that we can't ignore. So these are some provincial standards, the Ontario traffic manuals that I mentioned a couple slides ago about the stop signs. So these are the 5 main ones that we keep in mind when we're looking at designing. We've got book 1, just a general introduction to the traffic manuals. Book 5 is our regulatory signs. Book 12 is our traffic signals. 15 is our pedestrian crossings, and 18 is our bicycle facilities. These are the provincial standards that every single municipality in the province of Ontario follows. They're a proven standard. They're set out. They're kind of the legal requirements of what we do and how we do it. And we make sure that it's consistent across the province. Within these manuals, there's a warrant system for everything. The warrant system says, in this case of a traffic signal, there needs to be X amount of vehicles traveling through all directions of the intersection. There needs to be the X amount of pedestrians. There might be collision data. There's all sorts of a number of things that would create this warrant system. And as the warrant system doesn't maybe just go no signals to yes signals, it might be a graduated, well, what kind of signal? Maybe it's a stop sign, maybe it's a yield sign, maybe it's a stop sign, maybe it's a stop with a red flashing light, maybe it's a full signal. So every step of the way, you go into the next threshold of what is the warrant. Now, while these are great and every municipality uses them, we recognize that they're a high standard. They may not be tailored to every single municipality. They might be more towards a Barrie or a Toronto or a provincial highway per se. So this is where this policy comes into play. Is where do we bridge that gap? If we look at this warrant system, we might realize that, well, the town doesn't have many streets that would actually ever meet this warrant system because of our size and our volumes and things like that. So that's where this policy comes in, is where do we find a reasonable midpoint to have how do we generate our own warrant system? How do we make sure that we're still complying with the provincial standards, yet make it more attainable to provide some traffic calming features and do other things like that? So we've had a quick overview of what is traffic calming, what are the components of each of them, and what it is, what it isn't. So, the question why a lot of us are here today is, how can your street receive traffic calming? What does the policy actually say? So we're going to run through the process here. We'll go through each one, we'll discuss it, and then we'll run through some examples and show, what it would look like and what it wouldn't. So here's an overall view of the entire process. This is the flow chart for the process from start to finish. We're going to go through each step, so don't worry if it's a lot taken right now. We'll go step by step, but essentially this is what we're going to follow. So let's just jump right in. So in order to start the process, obviously we have an initiation, we have a pre-screening. So we have a complaint, a concern come in, speeding on my street. Excuse me. And there's a process. We set the process. Well, there needs to be a a petition put together by the residents. There needs to be buy-in that 51% of the residents on that street are in favor that yes, there is actually an issue and we'd like to see something done. When that's brought forward, that's when we go into the pre-screening. So the pre-screening kind of has 2 steps. There's kind of an initial screen that's done right by the residents when they go through with the petition to get everybody's buy-in if they'd like it or not. And then there's a full pre-screening by staff that verifies the condition. So the initial screen for residents essentially has 3 components. We're going to look for the length of the street, the classification of the street, as well as the speed of the street. And when we move forward to the staff level, there's going to be a couple more questions we have just to get a little bit deeper into the situation. So this is the pre-screening form that staff will be filling out. You see there's 8 main questions, pass, fail, yes or no. And essentially we will go through each one of them at the end of the pre-screen. If every single item is pass, we pass. If there's one fail, it fails the screening, and then we end the process right there. So step 1, we're going to look at, is this road a local or a secondary collector road? This is an important question because the traffic calming policy currently is only applicable to local roads. So we need to know, well, is it even the roadway applicable to that? Question number 2 is the AADT greater than 500? Well, you might ask, what is AADT? That is the annual average daily traffic volume. So basically, how many cars are on the road? Are we over 500 cars per day? Yes or no? Is the posted speed limit 50 kilometers an hour? Yes or no? Is the road assumed? Assumption of a road essentially means, does the municipality own it? In some areas, like in active developments, the municipality has not assumed the road. The developer has control of the road. We may be limited on what we can do based on our development agreements. So that's an important question. Is the road primarily residential? This is important because, we want to have safer neighborhoods, but just because it's a local road doesn't necessarily mean it's a residential road. We could have a local road within an industrial subdivision or a commercial zone or something like that. So it's important to know, are we talking about a residential area or not? Number 6, does the street provide an obvious bypass to a major intersection? In other words, are people trying to create a shortcut? Are they trying to go around that red light that they can't turn left on, or something of that nature? Number 7, is the road section longer than 150 meters? And this is important because, we might get the odd section in town where there's a short little stub. And when the sections are shorter than 150 meters, it becomes challenging to implement things. The traffic patterns may not be consistent, and you might not have that long lead time to actually implement anything meaningful. So this is an important question as well. And number 8, have any previous efforts been made within the last 12 months? And this basically means previous efforts relating to traffic calming. Has there been anything done in the last 12 months? Yes or no? So question number 1 in the pre-screening was the classification of the road. Was a local and correct collector. So here is just a quick overview of the classification of the roads in town. You'll see the black roads near the bottom of the screen. Those are the provincial highways. Those are Highway 12 and Highway 93. The darker road that comes through town, darker gray, I should say, it's County Road 93. So right off the bat, those are county and MTO jurisdictions. The municipalities does not have any control over those roadways, so this policy does not apply to them. All of the red roads you see here, those are our arterial roads. Those are the main roads in town, which are meant to move traffic and connect smaller collector and local roads. Those are also not applicable to this policy as well, because the point of those roads, again, is to move the traffic efficiently and effectively. All of the blue lines you see here, those are the collector roads in town as well. And the collector roads are essentially, they are connecting these local neighborhoods to other larger collectors or these arterial roads. And those as well currently are not part of the traffic calming policy because, again, we need to move vehicles. And then all of the light gray roads that you see within it would be the local roads. And those are the roads that we're talking about tonight as part of the policy. Further to those, we have the truck route map, just for information. So essentially, you'll see in red here, the designated truck routes. They essentially follow all of our arterial roads, so the main roads through town. The only one that is not on an arterial road is the section of First Street between Yonge Street and Bayshore. And that is essentially because there's no connection between the Yonge and King truck route and the Bayshore, Vinden, William truck route. So there needs to be that main connection to move trucks through town. So one thing just to note is you may say, well, here's the truck routes. How come I might have a truck on not a route or somewhere else? And there are some restrictions or some flexibility within the Highway Traffic Act with truck routes. Trucks are allowed to go a certain distance off of the truck route when making a delivery or not, or working on a project. So you may have a construction site going on in a local road building a house, while the truck can go in there to make a delivery, or you might have a larger FedEx truck, something like that. So that's just something to note as well. So we've done the request, we did the petition, we've got the resident buy-in, we've done the pre-screening. Well, what did we find out? Well, if we went through the process and staff determined that the pre-screening was not met, then we would have a letter back to the resident stating what was determined, and that the process would then end. If the pre-screening was passed, we move on to the next step. We go on to the data collection. So the data collection, that's when we're going out there with maybe our radar trailer, maybe some other software, and we're collecting our speed analysis, our volume analysis, pedestrians. We're going to watch it. We're going to see what is pedestrian service like? What is the vehicle service? Are people obeying the signs? Is the sidewalk safe? Is there a lot of kids? Is there schools? All sorts of different things. Once we're done the data collection, that's when we move into the point assessment. And the point assessment is the part where we do the consistent fact-based findings and we create these consistent outcomes. So here is just a blank version of our point assessment form. You can see on the left-hand side, there are 4 or 5 main features. We have speed, volume, collisions, and sidewalks and pedestrian details. And this is basically how we collect the points. So let's just roll through. So right off the top, we have the roadway type, local, collector, arterial. And those are just for information purposes on our end as we're doing our own collection. Collectors and arterials, as it stands, would not make it through the pre-screening. So that's just for staff's note. So with the speed, and how do we get the points? So for speed, we have 40 km/h posted speed. So how do we get the points? Well, we're going to look at the 85th percentile speed. And the 85th percentile speed is the speed at or which 85% of cars are traveling or lower. This is a standard that's used across the province, North America, the world, and even some cases. And so it's the standard that's been proposed for this policy. So in this case, for 40 kilometers posted, this should actually, we could even read this 40 kilometers or under speed limits, because there are some park roads at 20s. You'll get 1 point for every 1 km/h over the posted speed, and 1 point for every high-end speeder, up to a maximum of 10 points. The next category would be the 50s and 60s. And it's the same idea, 85th percentile speed, but you don't get points until you are 10 km/h over the posted speed limit. And the reason for this is, on these roadways that are a little bit faster, there's this kind of unwritten rule of 10 kilometers over the posted speed. It's accepted by society. So that's the way we've proposed it. The second main section is the volume. So volume on here, we've got local streets, we've got some collector information. Again, this is just for town information for staff as we're going through. We're collecting this information on all of our sites. So local ones are the main one that we're talking about here. So we're looking for, is the volume greater than 1,000 vehicles? 1,000 vehicles per day, I should say. And if it is, you'll get 1 point for every additional 100 vehicles. If we were to consider collector roads, we'd look at a rural collector street. And a rural collector street would be a road like a Midland Point road, something like that, right? It's a rural cross section. We've got ditches, we've got lower traffic volumes. And so we're looking for 2,000 vehicles per day, and you get 1 point for every 150 vehicles over that. An urban collector would be something like a 4th Street between Yonge and Hugo. And we're looking for 3,000 vehicles, and you get 1 point for every 250 vehicles up to a 20 max. For collisions, local or collector, doesn't matter in this case, you can get 5 points for 1 preventable collision recorded by police over the past 3 years. And you get 10 points for 2 or more preventable collisions recorded resulting in personal injury over the last 3 years. Now, just to note, preventable collisions, it's defined as those that are considered preventable through the use of traffic calming measures. So we're looking at speed related ones. We're not looking at collisions where somebody might have been drinking and driving, or clearly not obeying traffic signs and things of that nature. Excuse me. Pedestrian activity. You'll get 5 points for every pedestrian oriented facility, up to maximum 15 points. So a pedestrian facility would be something that generates a lot of pedestrian activity. So you're looking at housing facilities, parks, community, retail stores, churches, playgrounds, libraries, schools, things of that nature. All of those would be applicable to a pedestrian oriented facility. Then we look at sidewalks. Is there sidewalks or no sidewalks? So no sidewalks, but there's evidence of pedestrian activity. There's an automatic 5 points. If there is no sidewalks with no evidence of pedestrian activity, we're still applying 5 points to it because there's no sidewalk at the end of the day. A sidewalk on one side of the road, there would be 5 points applied to it as well. Just to note, if there was a sidewalk on both sides of the road, there would be 0 points applied to it from that perspective. But the next one is the quality of pedestrian service. So this one needs a little bit of explanation, and we've actually modified this section a little bit. There was this is a little bit different than what's in the draft, and we expected some comments on this. So we've updated it a little bit, and we're happy to get your comments on the rest of this as well. So pedestrian service is defined as the condition of the pedestrian routes, such as sidewalks and crosswalks. And so ultimately we're looking at pedestrian safety. What is the level of service of pedestrian safety? So, and it's kind of an inverse relationship. So 1 would be high and 5 would be low. So if you have an extremely safe pedestrian setup, sidewalks with wide boulevards, crossings that are very safe, everything is done to the latest standards, you would have a very high quality of pedestrian service, meaning that it would score low. Now, if you had a road that had a sidewalk that was maybe narrow, right next to the curb, poor sight lines, poor crossings, all that stuff, well, the quality of the pedestrian service in that case would be low, meaning that it's going to score high. So it would get the most points. The next thing we're going to look at is driveway density. And it's a residential road, right? What are the driveways? What are the sight lines? People fill driveways with stuff. And quite often people fill their stuff right out to the road. So what is the sight lines like? Well, so we've proposed to give 5 points out of 100 points for a driveway density that exceeds 5 driveways per 100 meters. Now, just to clarify, this is 5 driveways per side of the road, not both sides combined. So for example, if there was 10 driveways in a 100-meter section, you would get 10 points. It's 5 points per 5 driveways. And then bicycling, you would get an automatic 10 points if the route is on a signed bicycle route. And this is a route as identified in the town's bicycle route through the master plan process. So we go through all of that, and we're looking for a minimum of 35 points for a local roadway to qualify. Yes or no? So back to our flow chart. We've done this review. And what did it mean? Well, if it passed start, we have more than 35 points, we'll move on to the next step. If it didn't, the process would end, the resident would be notified. So what is the next step? Well, it's department review. So this is where we look at the situation. We have our data collected. We have we've monitored the site, we've looked at all the constraints, and now we start to prepare some alternate solutions. So our alternate solutions will first be circulated internally to our own departments, operations, emergency services, any other applicable department that might be needed to provide some input to it. Once that is done, that will help mold what the final, I'll call final alternate solutions would be. And we'll take those final alternate solutions to a public information center. If there happened to be something aroused from the situation that there was a major concern from a department, whether it be operations or an emergency service situation where traffic calming it would immediately put a halt on it for some other reason, the process would end. There'd be a letter back to the residents notifying them of the situation, and the process would end. Otherwise, we'll carry on to the Public Information Center. So the Public Information Center, that's where we bring the options to the residents, to the public. Could be very similar to what we're doing tonight. It could be a presentation, or it could be an open house or an in-person presentation, something like that. We'll say, you know, this is how we got to our solutions. This is what the town proposes for the traffic calming measures, and we get the buy-in from the residents. From the PIC, we'll move to the Community Support Survey. Community Support Survey will be very similar to the petition that started this whole thing off. We're going to look for majority buy-in of each household on the preferred solution. So we're going to take the alternate solutions in the PIC. We're going to get the comments from the residents, and ultimately the goal is to come out of that and have a preferred solution. So that preferred solution will be then sent back to each household. There'll be a survey that everybody needs to respond back to the town. And if we get majority, then we will proceed to the next step. If we don't get majority, then it will end the process and a letter back to the residents notifying of the process. If we get majority buy-in, we move on to finalizing the plan. Finalizing the plan will be essentially that. Any final details we'll look at. What's it cost? What's the timing? What's the time of year? Can we even install it this year, or is it winter time? Is it not? Right? All of those kinds of things. One of the first steps in finalizing the plan is always, do we have the money? Do we have the money in a currently approved budget time of year? So if this was today and we had to find a plan, I'd have to look, well, in my 2021 capital budget, do I have money for this? If I do, we can move right ahead to implementation. If we don't, we may have to go back for council approval. Council approval may be through a budget process like our upcoming 2022 budget process, or it could be a special report to council. Once we do that, if council does not approve it, it would essentially end the process. If they do approve the money, then we'll move back to the implementation process of it and carry on. So once we implement, we've got this new street out there with some new features on it. Well, we want to determine, well, is it working? Is it doing what we wanted to accomplish? So we'll evaluate, we'll monitor it. We'll monitor for 4 to 6 weeks, we'll monitor for a year. We'll check the traffic patterns. Have we actually reduced the speed? Have we just shifted the problem to a neighboring street? Have we, caused problems somewhere else, or is it doing exactly what we wanted it to do? If we find that it's not doing what we wanted, well, then there's an opportunity to look at removing it. If we have found that it's doing what we wanted, then the process ends because we were successful and we've implemented this traffic calming measure. Now, similar to the request and the petition to get things going, there's also an opportunity for residents to have this removed. Similar type petition, a removal petition this time, majority of the street, we get buy-in from everybody. Do we want it removed? If it is majority votes for it, it gets removed. And the only caveat to that is there's then a time restriction on when future traffic calming measures could be applied to that street. And I believe that is 5 years, I believe. So this is the process. Might seem complicated, might not, might seem like there's a lot of steps. But let's just kind of go through a couple quick examples. So first example we have here is Victoria Street. And this is one that's come up a few times over the last couple of years for areas that people would like to see some traffic calming measures put in. It was one of the sample locations that were carried through in the council report back in May as well. So let's go through the pre-screening and the point collection system and see, how we actually make out. So here's our pre-screening form. And let's go through number one. So is this road a local or secondary collector? Well, if we think back to our classification map, this is actually a collector road. So it fails under this one. Is the volume over greater than 500? Yes, it is volume. And we can say this because we actually have collected data on this street. So we do have some more data than just the initial screen on this one. Is the posted speed limit 50 kilometers an hour? Yes. Is the road assumed by the municipality? Do we own the road? Yes, we do own the road. Is the road primarily residential? Yes, it is. Does the street provide an obvious bypass to a major intersection? In this case, yes and no, but for this scenario, we agreed that it did. Is the road longer than 150 meters? Yes, it is, this road section. And have any other previous efforts been made in the last 12 months? And no, there wasn't any. So what happened here? Well, in this case, Victoria Street would fail the pre-screening process because it is a collector road. And so the process would discontinue at this point. Let's move on to another example. So another example would be Fifth Street. Fifth Street's another one that we've seen multiple requests come up to collect some data, get some traffic calming on. So we've done that. So this section is Fifth Street between Ontario and Victoria, I believe, just up from Harborview Vinden intersection. And let's go through the same process. Is it a local or collector road? Well, it's a local road, so it passes under this one. Is the volume greater than 500? Yes, it is. Is the posted speed 50? Yes, it is. Does the municipality own the road? Yes, we do. Is it road primarily residential? Yes, it is. Does the street provide an obvious bypass to a major intersection? In this case, it does, because a lot of people use it to get around that Vinden Harborview 4th Street intersection at the traffic lights. Is the section longer than 150 meters? It is really close, but in this case it is. And have any other previous efforts been made in the last 12 months? And in this case, no, there hadn't been. So Fifth Street passes the pre-screening requirements. So we move on to the data collection, the point assessment. So what do we actually score the street as? So it's a 50 kilometer zone. So we go to the 50 kilometer per hour speed zone. And after we collected our data, we determined that the 85th percentile speed was 46.45 kilometers per hour on this stretch of road. So therefore it's under the posted speed limit of 50. And that is a combination, that's an average between the 85th percentile speed for northbound and southbound traffic. The volume on a local road, the volume was 975 cars per day. That was the average volume over the time that we collected data, which is just under the 1,000 vehicles required for a local road. Sidewalks, it has wide sidewalks on one side of the road, so it automatically gets 5 points. And the quality of service, well, we look at the sidewalks in this scenario and the pedestrian crossings, and the sidewalks are away from the edge of the road. There's a nice conservative buffer. The pedestrian crossings are fairly good. They're stop control situations. So we scored it, we gave it 2 points. So the level of service we'll call it medium high. So not perfect, could be better, but not terrible either. Driveway density, this is where it gets the bulk of the points. There's lots of driveways in this area. So there was actually 10 driveways per side per 100 meters. So they got 2 sets of 5 points for 10 points total. And it is not a bicycle route. So all of this combined for 17 points total. So did we meet the minimum 35? No, we didn't. And the Fifth Street fails on the data collection stage. So the future, let me just grab a drink of water quick. So the future, and what does that mean for us? And what does that mean for data collection and a number of things? So just thinking ahead to how we make, once this policy gets adopted, how are we more efficient at it? Will we have a radar trailer right now that goes out? In order for us to accurately collect data, we need to be on a road for a minimum of 2 weeks. We need to collect data of, say, northbound for 7 days and southbound for 7 days. So when we consider the weather window of when that radar trailer can be out there, since it can't be out in the winter months, we're limited to the number of locations that we can get to. We can actually collect data unless we have 10 of these trailers going around, but these trailers aren't cheap also. So that's when we looked at, well, this is the pole mount sign. The pole mount sign can maybe be out a longer period of time, but it's ease of moving it around may not be as easy. So it might be in locations for longer periods of time. So we thought there has to be another solution. And lucky for us, there is one out there. So Streetlight is a product out there that we've been in conversation with. We've had some presentations, we're in some preliminary talks. We plan to carry this as a proposal in our 2022 budget for traffic analysis. And essentially what this is, the Streetlight uses big data to determine what people are doing. We all have a cell phone in our pockets. Most of us have maybe a GPS in a vehicle, might have a GPS watch, an Apple Watch, things of that nature. So this software uses that technology to, I will say, somewhat track what we're doing. They have a very wide variety of information that they can pull from their software. They can determine our speeds. They can determine the type of the modal split. So are we in a car? Are we walking? Are we on a bike? It has the ability to separate all of that. It has the ability to say, well, where was your trip? Did you start from Midland and drive to Penetang? Or did you come from Barrie and into Midland, or from Midland and to Barrie? We can kind of start to classify where people are traveling in town. So this is a pretty neat project, or pretty neat software that will allow us to much quicker get this information. It's collecting the data all the time, and there's essentially a 1 month lag from when we can get it. So today is August 24th. I could get up to, say, July 24th data. So it's a month lag, but it's collecting all the time. So as part of this traffic calming and to show what this thing can do, we got them to give us a couple of different scenarios in town. And it's going to help with our budget presentation as well. So we've got them to give us a scenario of 4th Street between Hugill and Yonge, and Midland Point Road between Fuller and Glenbrook, I believe it is, Glenbrook Drive. And we wanted to use these ones because these are some roads that we quite often hear about. Traffic calming needs to be done. And we've heard a lot of comments so far to date that these are collector roads, so they're not applicable. So we wanted to include them in the presentation to show they're not in the policy, but if we were to include collectors, well, how would they be interpreted at this point in time? So the data collected here was over the month of May and June, so 2 months total. So it's a fairly big sample size, which is great. The larger the sample size, normally the higher the accuracy. And one of the neat things with this program is they're able to calibrate it based on known traffic values in town. So they used traffic volumes from some of our traffic reports that were taken from our traffic radar trailer to calibrate the system. And once the system was calibrated, the results were very similar to what we received in with the traffic radar signs. So we do know that the system is fairly accurate, which is good news. So here's what those couple examples look like. On the top, you'll see this is our 4th Street example. So this is between Hugill Ave and Yonge Street. So we look at speed, northbound and southbound, it's separated. You'll see the northbound 85th percentile speed for 4th Street was 46 kilometers per hour. And with the traffic trailer, it was recorded right at 50. For southbound, it was 42 kilometer an hour. And with the traffic trailer, we had 47, sorry. So we had a slightly higher speed with our traffic trailer. And, this could be because of the time of when it was collected. The trailer was not in here at the same time. It's a smaller sample size, so things tend to be different. But where we're confident that it's pretty close is when we look at the volume. When we look at the northbound and southbound volumes, the volumes are fairly accurate. Again, the volumes could be different based on the time it was there. You know, COVID considered and not considered, things like that. But it's within a level that we're confident that it's accurate. We've seen these numbers before. When we look at Midland Point Road between Gawley and Glenbrook, we have an average speed, or sorry, the 85th percentile speed in both directions is 53. So 3 kilometers an hour over the posted speed limit. And the east and westbound volume was 400 and 350. So the volumes were relatively low. Even though it's a collector road, the volumes were relatively low. So this is just interesting to note, you know, how does it compare? How does it compare? So when we look at streetlight, the information that would be at our fingertips if we went through it. And what would it look like if we ran these 2 collector roads through our process? How would they fare? Well, Midland Point Road. So Midland Point Road, if we considered collector roads, we pass it. It would fail under the volume and it would pass under the remainder of the other criteria. So ultimately, Midland Point Road would fail the current policy because of the volume for a collector road, and it would not move forward. 4th Street, on the other hand, would pass everything if we included collector roads because it has the volume and it has all of the other aspects of it. So we pass the process. So we move on to data collection. So 4th Street is a 40 kilometer an hour posted speed limit. So we look at the 85th percentile speed and we give them 1 point for every 1 over. So the average 85th percentile speed was 44. It was 46 for the northbound and 42 for the north. So we average it out. The volume was 1,313. That's the average volume between the northbound and southbound. So it is under the 3,000 minimum for the urban collector streets. So it would get 0 points. For collisions, there was 2 known collisions in this location in the last 3 years, one of which we considered to be preventable collision. The other ones, based on the nature of them, wouldn't be classified as preventable, so we gave it 5 points. 4th Street has sidewalks on both sides of the road, so it would get 0 points. But when we look at the quality of service, you know, what are those sidewalks and crossings like? So sidewalk is on both sides of the road, but it's fairly close to the edge of the road. The east side of the road, it's right next to the curb, and the west side, it's a fairly small boulevard, paved boulevard. So we scored it a little bit higher than middle ground, and it got a 3. There are quite a few driveways on 4th Street, so it got 15 points total for the driveways, and it's not a bike route, so it got 0. So all in all, totaled for a total score of 27. And which would be just under the minimum 30 points that we had specified for the local roadways. So 4th Street would essentially fail under the data collection stage. So that's kind of an overview of what examples we have out there and what some theoretical examples would be if we consider some collector roads, some known hotspots that we've had questions on. So after tonight, what's next? So we have a question and feedback deadline of September 3rd. So that's next Friday, I believe. And we will take those comments, feedback, everything, and we'll start to finalize the policy. The goal is to take the final policy to council on the October 20th meeting. So we need to work quickly to get the policy finalized, get some staff reports written up and out to council. And now we'll open it up to some questions. I saw a few questions flow in there towards the end. So I think we'll go through those and see where they're at. So we have here, what is a high-end speeder And how are we going to calculate them? A high-end speeder would be like the top speed. If it was a 50 zone, say you had somebody go through there at an 85. Well, we'd look at, you know, who is the high score basically, and we want to see what the upper limit of that was, and then we give a point based on that. The point, I will say, the point system is the area that we expected to get a lot of the comments. So, you know, we definitely appreciate, we encourage them, and we're open to tweaking it as we need to, definitely. Could you do a scenario or excuse me, could you do a scenario of criteria for Midland Point Road? Well, we actually did one. That's perfect. So we got to go through it. We got to see some numbers of how it was at that point in time. What is the source of the data collection if this gets approved? Do residents need to install an app for the service? No, this is basically all driven off of what's already functioning off of applications on phones, watches, things like that. There's no subscription for residents. There's no anything. It's just using open source big data, just like Google does for their traffic on their Google Maps. So it's nothing extra that anybody has to do. It's just this company is taking that information and they are manipulating it in a way to get useful information to provide to us, to provide us with more data to make fact-based decisions. I would like to point out that May and June was during COVID-19 lockdown. Great point. You know, that is definitely has to be considered when we're doing these traffic analyses. We need to make sure, you know, what is the environment? COVID has affected our lives in so many different ways, as we're here virtually tonight. But you know, it needs to be considered. Are the volumes down? Are they increased for certain reasons? And we would do the same thing if we had a major construction project, for say. Right now, the county is doing the roundabout out at 93 and Vinden Street. So we wouldn't go do any kind of major traffic analysis anywhere close to that location that would be affected by that construction. Same with downtown last year. With King Street, there were some people there, they find their ways around it, they find their preferred routes. So you kind of have to let it get back to a level of normal, and COVID definitely has to be considered when we're doing this analysis. What about near miss reporting as recommended by the master plan? So near miss reporting, it is recommended in the master plan. The challenge with near miss reporting is what is a near miss and what's justified and what isn't. What is a near miss based on an actual, call it, design flaw in a road, or what is a near miss because of a driver that's not paying attention? It's definitely something that we could look at. We could adding in. We'll have to think about the most efficient way to do that, but it is a more challenging one because of the perception of near miss, just like the perception of speeding, right? It's always a perception of cars flying down the road. We collect data, and sometimes it's not as bad as it is. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Are there any streets that would pass theoretically? I'm sure there is. Yeah, I mean, we don't have data for all streets out there. We could definitely, if we were approved to get the streetlight program, we would be able to run a lot more scenarios to be able to, I guess, further pilot the policy to see, you know, how applicable is it to our traffic volumes, and that maybe comes into, do we need to make changes to the volumes and speeds and things like that within it, or the scoring based process? Maybe we make it easier to get points. Maybe we don't. Maybe we make the threshold lower. Things like that. If speed measurements reduce the observed speeds, why is this biased result used in the points calculation? If speed measurements reduce the speeds observed, why is this? Stuart, maybe I'll open up your mic and get you to maybe elaborate a little bit more on this question on what you mean. Stuart, your mic should be open now if you're able to speak. We can't hear you if you're speaking.
while he's trying to get on, Mitch, maybe I can say, you know, when we're trying to do analysis, we need data, and there's only a few ways to get data. So our traffic trailer and our sign, if people see their speed and they slow down, well, that's the only data we have. You may have seen our speed trailer not showing a speed when you go by. And that's because we run it in stealth mode. People don't think it's turned on, so therefore they don't slow down. But we're still collecting data on that. So we actually, in fact, can determine the impact of people seeing that sign flashing or not. The software solution that Mitch mentioned, that is totally independent of the psychology of anybody seeing anything, because it's just, you know, it tracks when you're walking, it tracks when you're on a bicycle, it tracks all the time as long as you got your cell phone on, because that's just Big Brother watching what we do with our cell phones. So again, if we're trying to use facts and data, that's why, you know, we'll be talking to council about software that is more independent of a reaction that somebody has on the street. But as Mitch already showed, the data collected over a longer period of time, which will give you a better statistical result, is almost identical to what we're seeing with the speed sign anyway. So, you know, and Mitch, you maybe comment on a couple cases where stealth mode versus turned on, we saw a very small, we saw a difference, but not a lot of difference.
There definitely was a difference, not a major difference, you know, 2 or 3 kilometers per hour difference, definitely, but nothing astronomical. And Stuart, I'm not sure if you're able to speak or not, but I think I'm understanding what your question is kind of observed back to the speed sign, as if the speed sign is recognize that there's a reduction in speed. Are we using this reduction for our points calculation? And the answer to that would be no. If you are traveling across the radar trailer, say you're going 60, you slow down to a 50 in the time that you are within the zone of the radar. It will record that change, and it'll mark you down as you went from 50 to 60, or from 60 to 50, sorry. But the first initial speed that's read is the speed that's going to be marked down for the data analysis or for the data collection. So you don't need to be concerned that we are taking the reduced speed. We're taking the first initial hit of when you enter into the radar screen. Okay, next question. If Midland Point Road does not meet the criteria for a study, can we suggest other measures in the meantime to reduce excessive speeders? Absolutely. You know, that's always an option. There could be suggestions made at any time. There's always options for local improvements for areas too, if there wanted to be some major changes. Local improvements quite often are something that is borne at the expense by the local area residents, but there's always opportunities to reach out to staff or council and provide your suggestions. Noise may be excessive and causing hearing damage. So noise, I'm assuming that's related to vehicle exhaust, loud cars, motorcycles, trucks, things like that. That's something that the policy doesn't touch on. That's more of a Highway Traffic Act thing. It kind of leads back to enforcement. So we always recommend that, you know, if you have complaints of this kind of stuff, always reach out to OPP. They're on board with our policy as well, and you know, we're kind of a combined effort between them. And I reached out to them prior to this, and basically their message back to the residents was reach out to them, report it. They don't know necessarily unless they get people reaching out to them. So they recommended that you call their non-emergency number, and they will put them on their list for enforcement. And obviously the more complaints they get for one area, the more they'll target certain areas. But we leave that kind of aspect to the OPP. Thank you for running the Midland Point Road criteria. That's good. You're welcome. Many large semi trucks and trailers are using 4th Street. So yes, I'm assuming that's the 4th Street between Yonge and Hugo. So 4th between Bay and Harborview is a truck route. That's a designated route, arterial road. But from Hugel to, or from Bay to Young is not a truck route. And that there is no truck route signages on there. Signs not always obeyed. Andy, I see you popped up. Did you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I was out at the operations center yesterday, and there'll be a new, the sign came in for put on Young Street for a no left truck
left turn.
turns for trucks. So we've made up a sign. That was a suggestion from the community, and that sign just came in, and will hopefully go up this week when the guys get a chance to get the sign up. So again, a suggestion from the community. We looked into it and have purchased that sign.
Perfect. Next question is, what is the range of speed on Midland Point Road? So I'm not sure if you're referring to range of speed detected or range of speed limits. From a speed limit perspective, currently it's a 50 from Fuller to, I believe, Glenbrook, and then it's 60 from Glenbrook to Lakewood. Now, just like to note that there is a report coming to council in a month or so that will recommend reducing that section that is a 60 speed limit on Midland Point Road to a 50, as well as a few other streets as well in town. It seems very difficult for any road to pass this process. What will the town do to address resident concerns about safety concerns on their road if it fails? So that is a little more challenging. I'm guessing you're mentioning, I believe this is more Midland Point Road from a safety concern with the lack of sidewalks and other things. You know, these were identified in our transportation master plan as areas that are missing pedestrian links. And it comes back to the challenge of a lot more work than we have budget for. When we look at the master plan process, I believe there was $58 million in projects to do in the next 20 years. And that doesn't include the maintenance projects that are at least that value. So it's a balancing act between adding the new stuff and maintaining the old stuff. And then that can be a challenging thing to do. In this situation, we would look at the specific situations. Is there a bus stop on it that is a problem? Blind corners? Is it sight lines? Is it maintenance issues that on our end that we can improve things? It's kind of a case by case basis at that point.
And Mitch, maybe I can just add for the residents. We saw some examples earlier. Signs aren't that expensive, but if we do sidewalks, we do road alignments, some of the vertical deflections, it takes money. Right now in our budget, council's approved, $15,000 to $25,000 a year for additional road safety issues. Versus we get into a sidewalk construction or bike lanes, we're into the tens of thousands of dollars on each and every project. So part of the challenge is right now we get $500,000 a year essentially from the government that we put towards our road improvements. And then a few big construction projects that you've seen out there. And then we've put substantial dollars the last few years into repairing sidewalks, about $300,000 a year. But if the community really wants to change and the physical environment, it does take money. And I just would encourage the residents to go to council during the budget process. We know there's demand some years for a 0% tax increase. That doesn't give us any money to implement anything. So I just give a shout out if you want us to find money to make some of the sidewalk improvements, bike lane improvements, things like that in your community. It takes money, and honestly, it's either a tax increase or, as Mitch mentioned, a local improvement. And just clarify what a local improvement is. It's you pay based on the frontage you have on the road for what gets built in front of your house. So it's, under the rules, it can be up to 100%. fully financed. So if your neighbors want a sidewalk and it's $100,000 project, we just divvy that cost up amongst the residents and you can get your sidewalk. So that option is there today, assuming there's road allowance, or if we have to expropriate land to put boulevards and sidewalks in, we can do it. It just takes money and time. But that's our challenge. Midland Point Road, as an example, we've got a $2 million rebuild of the section from Fuller over to Portage Park. And, that project will give some very narrow bike lanes on it because it's not a wide cross section because of the large ditches. Filling in the ditches and putting storm sewers in, so we could have sidewalks and ditches. We haven't priced it out, but it would easily be another $1 million on top of that project, making it a $3 million plus project. If the community wishes that, and there's money to do it, I always say in engineering, we can build anything, we just need money. But when people in the community are saying they don't want their taxes to go up, we don't have additional money to do anything other than fix what's broken in many cases.
Okay. What options can be considered for collectors? Surely we can't just wash our hands of taking any safety measures on collectors, perceived or evidence-based. Absolutely. So one option would be we look at, depending on the comments and the outcome from this consultation, does the overwhelming majority want collectors to be part of this policy? Is it included? And then if it is included, what type of scoring thresholds will we have on it? So those are some options. We could include it, yes or no. And if we do include it, do we have a totally different scoring system for it? Or do we use the same scoring system and we just change the thresholds? That would be one option. At the end of this webinar, actually, there will be a short survey that I encourage everybody to do, and there'll be some questions at the end of them that will help mold some directions that we'll take with collectors and whatnot. So everybody keep an eye out for that when you leave this webinar. I have one very easy suggestion to help with speeders on Midland Point Road: just a different location for the placement of the speed signs, more visible for drivers. That's an option. Definitely. I mean, we want to steer the conversation from this specific consultation away from specific locations and more on what does the policy say. But something like that definitely is something that staff could look at and see for something simple like that. But for the purpose of tonight, we're looking at what does the policy say we could do in certain situations. Stuart, my mic isn't working, but my question is regarding the disqualification of fourth by only a few points on speed, where we know that the drivers slow down when they see the measuring device. Okay, so Stuart, I hope I answered your question by clarifying that we are using the first red speed in our analysis, not the slowing down. We're just essentially using the slowing down as a point to note that it is working for traffic calming when it's present. I have no posed question, but I see no means of activating a microphone. Yes, if there's a microphone, we would need to promote you to use the microphone. So Mayor Strathorn, if you do have a question that you'd like to speak about, definitely let us know and we can turn your mic on. The collision categories are confusing. The last two seem to have an error, plus do they all add up, or can only one be applicable at a time? I'm assuming that's applicable based on if there's a collision and then a collision with injury, do they add up? The way that I personally interpret is that they do add up. If there was a collision, you get your 5 points. If that collision happened to cause bodily harm, then you would get the additional 10 points from the other point scenario. But again, it's something that if there's error and confusion, this is the time that definitely we can look at clarifying that. Thanks for the answer. Perfect. So we'll go with that. I guess I answered your question. Excellent. I have a report regarding Midland Point Road. I will have to look at it The report 800 to 1,200 vehicle days within the past couple of years. So maybe the 500 was during the COVID lockdown. It's quite possible. We've been out in the Midland Point Road a couple times. We did have our radar trailer out there earlier this year. One point to note on that is it was in a different section. It was actually in the 60 zone because we wanted to see where the car is actually traveling faster there. I believe tomorrow, and Bailey can connect me if I'm wrong, tomorrow the radar trailer is actually going out to Midland Point Road between Galloway and Glenbrook in the 50 zone. And so we're going to collect some data. So we're really interested to see what that looks like compared to the streetlight data. Is it, are we seeing same volume and speed results that streetlight had? So we're going to go through some checks and balances on that software ourselves and kind of get a level of confidence if it's going to do what we want it to do. When conditions change, such as a new fatal collision or new infrastructure, there should be an evaluation regardless of when it was last done. Absolutely, that's a key point. And I would agree with that totally. If there is a major condition change of a situation, and I'm assuming this is referring to when we say that if it fails, we're not going to review it for a minimum of 3 years. Well, maybe we clarify that, or it's 3 years or a major change, say, a major pedestrian facility goes in, a park or something like that, schools. Key points with those though are those things just don't pop up overnight. If a new school like MSS went up, it went up on the same property, but that's multiple years to get approvals in place for things like that. So the town would be involved in those development type things. And I would agree that we need to make some flexibility for a major condition change. Maybe we look at it from more of a volume change perspective and things like that. Maybe we have a threshold to say, so X percentage of volume change, then we can look at, then it's eligible for it, something like that. So these are all great comments. Thank you, Mitch. I have 2 suggestions for helping reduce speeders to enhance community safety at Midland Point. Move the signage to more visible, and a community road watch program. Yep, again, we don't want to get too much into the specifics of one location tonight, but those are all great suggestions as we collect some data and work towards finalizing this policy. It's good to have buy-in from the residents on what they'd like to see, that's for sure. While the average speed may be 53 kilometers on Midland Point Road, what can we do about the less common but very dangerous drivers who drive much faster than 53 kilometers? That's a good question. So right now that's where that high-end speeder points come in. We use the 85th percentile, then we can apply points to the high-end speeders. So if we maybe we need to clarify a little bit better what a high-end speeder is and how they get points, and then we can count those number of high cars. Maybe 85% of the vehicles are traveling within an acceptable speed, but there are a few that are quite high that are of concern. Andy, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, maybe I can ask the mayor to comment. He's on the police service board and can comment on enforcement, because that's the other element to this is OPP enforcement outside of what our policies and procedures and whatever we implement.
I don't see the mayor on here anymore to pop his, maybe he got disconnected.
I'll just add then, and that's why the OPP say, they put their speed traps up. They've done a lot of enforcement, or more enforcement this year, I understand, than previous years. They've given out more tickets, I understand. And they set up their speed traps based on the data they get. And that data, they do look at our data collection that we do. We share it with them. And if they say, oh, there's a hot spot, they'll go in that area. The hot spots are determined by the phone calls and complaints that they receive. But for the 5 cars a day on any street that speed, the chances of police being there is 0. The chance of us with a slowdown sign, and that one of my comments I'll just add, we have 40 kilometers an hour on 4th Street. And a lot of people say that's what we want on our street. 4th Street still has the most complaints of around traffic than any other street in town, and it already has 40-kilometer speed limit. So it just goes to show we can't manage bad drivers. All traffic calming does is reinforce good drivers and good behavior. But if there's bad drivers out there, it doesn't matter what we do, unless a police officer is sitting there to catch them. That's our challenge with traffic calming. We work with the good drivers. And the other part that Mitch didn't bring up, that's, Midland Point Road is a collector. There's, a number, 200 or 300 houses out on that end of town that use that road. And it's, you don't know your neighbors. In many of our residential roads, though, they're in subdivisions. They're, short streets, a cul-de-sac, and everybody knows each other or has an opportunity maybe to know each other. And yet there's speeding problems and other traffic problems on their street. And peer pressure is still one of the best options to use. So talk to your neighbors. If it's, sometimes it's your neighbor that's the problem. And, that's why finding a solution is difficult here.
Sandy. Kate had a question. I believe it's clarifying to a question earlier about range of speeds. What was the fastest and slowest, and how many high speeds? This was for Midland Point Road, I believe. Unfortunately, Kate, I don't know that information off the top of my head. Again, we'd have to look at the data. We'll have some new data in a couple of weeks as the trailer goes out there next week, and we can look at the street light to see if that's the equivalent comparable data that we're getting from that same area. Perhaps the Midland Point Road project next year could include some speed bumps or traffic restriction measures. Again, that would all determine on the outcome of this policy. What does the final policy look like, and what does it say based on the pre-screening and the data collection and analysis of it? If we adopt this new policy this fall and doesn't apply to that road, then there's a very low likely that things like that could get implemented. However, through the design of the road and areas, maybe we can just newer standards tend to include some of those things. So we can look at some things, but again, we got to look at what does the policy say we should do for that road. Where is the data collected available? So right now, all the reports we have to date are through our Engaging Midland site. If you go on there for the traffic calming and traffic monitoring, there's a document library, and that's where all of our reports are for all of the data we've collected over the last couple of years. Those are just strictly, I'll call them a technical report. They've collected the data. They tell you what the situation is. They don't say what a solution is, what a problem. It just tells you the straight facts. This was the speed, this was the volume, and these were the constraints in the environment that it was taken in. Maybe larger signs, flash or ambering lights could be put on Midland Point Road. Yep, that's a possibility. That's something like that is definitely a more passive, that's kind of bridging the gap between passive and physical traffic calming, I would say. Good work put into this. I'd like to see collectors included. Look forward to this coming to us. Appreciate the comment, Councillor Gordon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attending. This is a pretty good turnout. Very informative. You're welcome. I would suggest you place the radar trailer at the corner of Midland and Portage Park and check the speeds of vehicles traveling up or down the hill between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. between 2:30 to 5. So we do have to be a little bit conscious of where the trailer goes with corners and whatnot, that the radar path is in a it's in a straight line. It kind of spans out in a narrow triangle, say, but major grades and major corners and sight lines can have, we've found challenges with the sensitivity. We can play with that. We can set it up to, kind of optimize it to the right location, but we do need to be concerned about where that is. So that's all part of when we choose a location for it, where is the best location, where we're going to get the best data. But we do want to be cognizant of where the concern locations for. So that is noted, and we'll see what we can do. With respect to the timing, it's collecting data 24/7. Anytime the sign is out there, it's collecting data. So, and we can classify all that data between the specific times of day. So if you actually check out one of the reports that are on the engagement site, you got to get a feel for the information that we have there. So it's quite good, actually. Is there a formal bylaw for this, or is it more of a policy? So it would be a policy. Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure. Is there a bylaw to adopt the policy, or do we just simply adopt the policy?
Council would pass a policy, and the confirming bylaw for the council meeting would take it. So
Okay. Yeah.
again, as a policy, it's a direction for staff to follow, and staff would make their recommendations to council based on the policy, and council would always have the opportunity to do something different when it's a policy, if they choose.
Okay, great, thank you. Just another comment from Councillor Gordon. Great turnout. Good work went into the policy. Still like to see collectors included in the policy. Please consider taking us up on the invite to complete the survey, and keep your comments going at the engineering@midland.ca, and report to OPP. And just above that one, I missed one actually. Yes, police enforcement is key. So definitely key. We would love to see OPP conducting a speed trap with the police car sitting in Porter's Park, not where they can be seen on the shoulder, between 6:30 and 8:30 a.m. Definitely an option. Again, reach out and coordinate with OPP for sure. Thanking Councillor Gordon and everything. Why must 4th Street be a collector? So 4th Street is a collector because it's that key point. That's a key north to south connection between the local roads. So if we go back to, maybe I'll even go back to the classification map so we can see it. Just pop out to my slides here. Where's our map gone? Right here. So this right here is 4th Street, this blue road right here. If we were to take that out, then there'd be no good northwest movement between 8th Street and 1st Street. So when we look at these key movements across town, we want to be consistent. We want to keep vehicles moving where we want them. If we just get rid of that, well, then we might not solve the problem. We might just push all the traffic to 5th Street or 6th Street or 3rd Street or something like that. Then we have a problem everywhere. Or do we have a problem based on what this policy says? So that's essentially why 4th Street is a collector, is because it's a key point. It lines up with this is the remainder of 4th Street down here, but that's the truck route, arterial route, that from Bay on to Vinden Street. I lost my location in the questions. Here we are. Okay. There needs to be a way to address the safety on collector roads. I hope collectors are considered in the policy. Again, yep, definitely these are good comments to hear. There'll be some information in the survey, and obviously we encourage everybody to send these comments through to us, whether it be through engaging or the engineering website or email. Definitely. Good suggestions on the spy speed trailer on Midland Point Road. Yep, thank you. Higher speeds will likely be measured in straight stretches, and I would think more people, not everyone, may slow down for a corner. And that's typically what we see. We like to hit straight stretches. The challenge with the straight stretch and the speed trailer is, you like to almost, like a speed trap, get that sneak attack. We don't want people to see them that far out in advance. So we can play with the sensitivity of the radar signs. We can bring the range in. So somebody could be driving up thinking, oh, the sign's not working or it's not on. And then all of a sudden, boom, it reads them much closer to the sign. So we can try to play with that based on the scenario to catch the most realistic speed. Again, we're recording the first registered speed. And we also have incognito mode, that stealth mode that we can look at. Are we, do we see a difference? People don't think it's on, they think it's not working, so they don't change their driving habits. So a couple different options we can do. As an OPP member, I will speak to Midland OPP to pursue enforcement. That's excellent. Great. We've got OPP on board. That's good to hear. I will also comment through the speed and safety on the corner of Midland Point Road is awful as well. Okay, that's great. This is something as far as a safety perspective of the road and you know, call it maintenance, and even in the wintertime and stuff, it's things that we'll make sure that our operations staff are aware of as well, and we'll review it and make sure that that this corner is, you know, is meeting all the applicable standards and whatnot. So that's all I see for questions, unless there's any more rolling in. I want to thank everybody, if there's no more, for coming out. We had a really good turnout, some great questions. I hope this was informational. I hope you understood our intent of the policy, and from this, I'm pretty confident that we're going to get some good comments that can help us get a very applicable policy for the town. Again, you know, it's, you know, where do we go from those provincial warrants, those provincial standards, to something that's more applicable to the town of Midland? The best way for us to do that is to get the buy-in from the public. So definitely, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that everybody has come out to this, and we've got some good stuff. We've already had some comments roll in from other residents that may not be here tonight. We've got Active Transportation Committee that's been reviewing this, providing some comments, which is great to hear. So it's good to see the turnout. One more question has come on in. I'm not sure that I like how 10 kilometer an hour over the speed limit for 50s area is acceptable. 10 kilometers makes a big difference. Good point. It's definitely, if that's how you feel, I would say provide those comments to us. Definitely, if we've got a, you know, maybe that's somewhere that we can look at changing the threshold or the point system. And Andy, jump back on there. You want to talk to that?
Yeah, and really, you know, that's the, when we look at speed enforcement, you also look to the Highway Traffic Act, you look to how the police enforce speeding. And in general, you know, police use their discretion to not ticket people that are 10 kilometers an hour over. Sometimes they do, but many times the officer uses their discretion, maybe just to give a warning at that level. So reason we took it into it, if police aren't going to enforce an infraction at, you know, 8 or 9 kilometers over the limit, you know, then is it relevant for us to score if it's not something that might be enforced? So, you know, that's really what the logic, or part of the logic behind that 10 kilometer number.
Great, thanks, Andy. Okay, well, I think that's it. Oh, another one just came in. Maybe a lower score under 10 kilometer hour. Just a thought. Yep, potentially. Yeah, we could look at how we score that, how we do that. Definitely, these are all good comments. So if you have any suggestions on how we score it, or on the criteria behind the scoring, by all means, we encourage you to send that information through, and we can definitely take a look at it. So yeah, once again, thank you everybody for coming. We will work towards finalizing the report, finalizing the policy and taking it to council. And we look forward to getting something in place, and then to start implementing some traffic calming throughout town. You know, it's something that will be great for the town of Midland. So appreciate you all coming tonight, and don't forget the survey. Fill it out. That helps us again get to the final product. So thank you for your time, and we will see you all another time.